The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves as Mary Wilson hurried down Main Street. She was a kindergarten teacher loved by everyone in the small town of Riverdale. Her warm smile and kind eyes always made people feel at ease. Today was special. Her 20th wedding anniversary was just 2 days away, and she wanted everything to be perfect. Mary pushed open the heavy glass door of Prestige Jewelers, the little bell above jingling to announce her arrival. The shop smelled of polish and leather, with bright lights making the diamonds sparkle like tiny stars under glass. She clutched her simple purse, worn at the edges from years of use, and approached the counter with a shy smile. "Good afternoon," she said to Mr. Jenkins, the old jeweler who had sold her husband the wedding ring 20 years ago. "I was hoping to get my wedding ring cleaned before our anniversary dinner." Mr. Jenkins beamed at her. "Of course, my dear. Let me see that beautiful ring. I remember when Tom bought it, he spent weeks picking out the perfect one." Mary slipped the gold band from her finger, the small diamond catching the light. The ring wasn't fancy or expensive, but it carried 2 decades of love, fights, makeups, and memories. She handed it over carefully, as if giving away a piece of her heart. "It'll take about 30 minutes. Feel free to look around while you wait," Mr. Jenkins said, disappearing into the back room. Outside the store, Officer Pete Harris sat in his car, watching Mary through narrowed eyes. His fingers tapped angrily against the steering wheel. 3 times he had tried to move up in the police department. 3 times he had been denied. And each time, Police Chief Tom Wilson, Mary's husband, had been the one to block his path. Not qualified, they said. Too impulsive, they said. Pete's face twisted with bitterness. 20 years on the force, and what did he have to show for it? A measly patrol officer's badge while younger cops passed him by. "Today's the day Tom Wilson learns not to mess with me," Pete muttered, checking his watch. He reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside gleamed a diamond pendant worth thousands, one he had secretly taken from the evidence locker last week. The theft had been reported in a neighboring town, not here in Riverdale. No one would connect it to him. Pete watched as Mary moved around the store, admiring the displays. Her purse hung loosely at her side as she bent to look at a bracelet. Perfect. He grabbed his civilian jacket to cover his uniform and slipped out of the car. Across the street, an unmarked police car pulled into a parking spot. Chief Tom Wilson sat behind the wheel, a bouquet of flowers on the passenger seat. He had finished work early to surprise Mary. He knew she would be getting her ring cleaned. Their daughter had accidentally mentioned it during breakfast. Tom smiled, thinking about the look on Mary's face when he showed up unexpectedly. 20 years of marriage, and his heart still skipped when he thought of her. As he was about to leave his car, Tom noticed Pete Harris hurrying across the street toward the jewelry store. Something about Pete's behavior seemed off, looking around nervously, wearing a jacket despite the warm day. Tom's police instincts kicked in. He knew Pete had been resentful lately, especially after being passed over for promotion last month. Instead of getting out, Tom sank lower in his seat and watched. Inside, Mary was lost in thought, imagining how their anniversary dinner would go. Maybe Tom would finally take a night off from thinking about work. Maybe they could recapture some of that magic from when they were young. She didn't hear the bell jingle as Pete entered the store. Pete nodded politely to Mr. Jenkins' assistant at the counter and pretended to look at watches near where Mary stood. His heart pounded in his chest. If he got caught, his career would be over. But if he didn't take risks, he'd be stuck writing tickets until retirement. His hands slipped into his pocket, fingers wrapping around the diamond pendant. As Mary moved to another display case, Pete followed. In one smooth motion, he dropped the pendant into her open purse. Unknown to Pete, Chief Wilson had stepped out of his car and now stood outside, flowers in hand, watching through the store window. He'd frowned as he observed Pete's strange behavior around his wife. Something wasn't right, and Tom's 25 years of police work told him to wait and watch before rushing in. The stage was set. The innocent woman, the vengeful officer, and the watchful husband who had no idea how this ordinary anniversary surprise was about to turn into the most dramatic day of their lives. Pete Harris lingered near Mary for a few more seconds, making sure the pendant was safely hidden in her purse. His heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement. 20 years of being overlooked by Chief Wilson would finally be paid back today. He glanced around the store. An elderly couple examining wedding bands, a young man nervously looking at engagement rings, and Mr. Jenkins' assistant typing something into the computer. No one was watching him. "Excuse me," Pete said politely as he brushed past Mary, who smiled kindly at him, completely unaware of what had just happened. Pete stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face. He ducked into the narrow alley beside the jewelry store and quickly shrugged off his civilian jacket, revealing his police uniform underneath. He straightened his badge and adjusted his belt, taking deep breaths to calm himself. This had to look convincing. From his car across the street, Chief Tom Wilson frowned. He had watched Pete enter the store, interact briefly with Mary, and then leave in a hurry. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. Why would Pete be in a jewelry store in the middle of his shift? Tom knew Pete's patrol route today. It was nowhere near this part of town. And that quick change of clothes in the alley? Tom's cop instincts were screaming at him. Inside the store, Mary wandered over to a display of watches, thinking about getting one for Tom. Their daughter had mentioned that Tom's old watch had been acting up lately. Mary's purse hung heavily from her shoulder, the stolen pendant nestled at the bottom next to her wallet and keys. "Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Jenkins called from behind the counter, "your ring is ready." Mary turned with a smile and walked back to the front of the store. Mr. Jenkins held up her wedding ring, now sparkling like new under the bright store lights. "It looks just like the day Tom put it on my finger," Mary said, her eyes misting slightly with the memory. She slipped it back on and wiggled her fingers, watching the diamond catch the light. Outside, Pete pulled his radio from his belt. "Dispatch, this is Officer Harris. I'm responding to a possible theft at Prestige Jewelers on Main Street. Over." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Officer Harris. No report has come in from that location. Over." "I observed suspicious activity while on patrol," Pete lied smoothly. "Just doing a routine check. I'll report back. Over." Tom's eyebrows shot up as he listened to the exchange on his own radio. There had been no call about a theft. What was Pete playing at? Tom reached for his phone and quickly sent a text message to Lieutenant Grace in Internal Affairs. Something wasn't right, and he wanted backup before making a move. Pete straightened his uniform one last time and walked back toward the jewelry store with purpose in his step. He pushed open the door, the bell jingling loudly. Everyone in the store turned to look at him. "Good afternoon, folks," Pete announced in his official police voice. "We've had reports of shoplifting in the area. I'm just here to check things out." Mr. Jenkins looked surprised. "Officer, I haven't called anything in." "Just a precaution, sir," Pete said, his eyes scanning the store until they landed on Mary. "We believe someone in this store may have taken something." Mary's eyes widened with innocent concern. She had no idea that her purse now contained stolen property, or that she was the target of a carefully planned setup by a man with a grudge against her husband. Tom watched from his car as Pete entered the store in uniform. His body tensed, ready to move. 25 years of police work had taught him to trust his gut, and his gut was telling him that Mary was in trouble. But rushing in now might make things worse. He needed to see what Pete was up to first. The elderly couple quickly left the store, wanting nothing to do with any police business. The young man, looking at engagement rings, backed away from the counter, eyeing the officer nervously. Pete moved through the store with practiced confidence, pretending to look for anything suspicious. He made a show of checking behind counters and looking under display cases while gradually moving closer to Mary. "Ma'am," he said, approaching her with a stern expression, "would you mind if I take a look in your purse?" Mary blinked in surprise. "My purse? Why?" "Just routine," Pete said, his voice firm but polite. "We have reason to believe something may have been taken from this store today." Outside, Tom's hand gripped the door handle of his car. One wrong move from Pete, and he would be inside that store in seconds. But for now, he watched and waited, collecting evidence with each passing moment. The flowers for his anniversary surprise lay forgotten on the passenger seat as his focus narrowed to the drama unfolding through the jewelry store window. Pete Harris lingered near Mary for a few more seconds, making sure the pendant was safely hidden in her purse. His heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement. 20 years of being overlooked by Chief Wilson would finally be paid back today. He glanced around the store, an elderly couple examining wedding bands, a young man nervously looking at engagement rings, and Mr. Jenkins' assistant typing something into the computer. No one was watching him. "Excuse me," Pete said politely as he brushed past Mary, who smiled kindly at him, completely unaware of what had just happened. Pete stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face. He ducked into the narrow alley beside the jewelry store and quickly shrugged off his civilian jacket, revealing his police uniform underneath. He straightened his badge and adjusted his belt, taking deep breaths to calm himself. This had to look convincing. From his car across the street, Chief Tom Wilson frowned. He had watched Pete enter the store, interact briefly with Mary, and then leave in a hurry. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. Why would Pete be in a jewelry store in the middle of his shift? Tom knew Pete's patrol route today. It was nowhere near this part of town. And that quick change of clothes in the alley? Tom's cop instincts were screaming at him. Inside the store, Mary wandered over to a display of watches, thinking about getting one for Tom. Their daughter had mentioned that Tom's old watch had been acting up lately. Mary's purse hung heavily from her shoulder, the stolen pendant nestled at the bottom next to her wallet and keys. "Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Jenkins called from behind the counter, "your ring is ready." Mary turned with a smile and walked back to the front of the store. Mr. Jenkins held up her wedding ring, now sparkling like new under the bright store lights. "It looks just like the day Tom put it on my finger," Mary said, her eyes misting slightly with the memory. She slipped it back on and wiggled her fingers, watching the diamond catch the light. Outside, Pete pulled his radio from his belt. "Dispatch, this is Officer Harris. I'm responding to a possible theft at Prestige Jewelers on Main Street. Over." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Officer Harris. No report has come in from that location. Over." "I observed suspicious activity while on patrol," Pete lied smoothly. "Just doing a routine check. I'll report back. Over." Tom's eyebrows shot up as he listened to the exchange on his own radio. There had been no call about a theft. What was Pete playing at? Tom reached for his phone and quickly sent a text message to Lieutenant Grace in Internal Affairs. Something wasn't right, and he wanted backup before making a move. Pete straightened his uniform one last time and walked back toward the jewelry store with purpose in his step. He pushed open the door, the bell jingling loudly. Everyone in the store turned to look at him. "Good afternoon, folks," Pete announced in his official police voice. "We've had reports of shoplifting in the area. I'm just here to check things out." Mr. Jenkins looked surprised. "Officer, I haven't called anything in." "Just a precaution, sir," Pete said, his eyes scanning the store until they landed on Mary. "We believe someone in this store may have taken something." Mary's eyes widened with innocent concern. She had no idea that her purse now contained stolen property, or that she was the target of a carefully planned setup by a man with a grudge against her husband. Tom watched from his car as Pete entered the store in uniform. His body tensed, ready to move. 25 years of police work had taught him to trust his gut, and his gut was telling him that Mary was in trouble. But rushing in now might make things worse. He needed to see what Pete was up to first. The elderly couple quickly left the store, wanting nothing to do with any police business. The young man, looking at engagement rings, backed away from the counter, eyeing the officer nervously. Pete moved through the store with practiced confidence, pretending to look for anything suspicious. He made a show of checking behind counters and looking under display cases while gradually moving closer to Mary. "Ma'am," he said, approaching her with a stern expression, "would you mind if I take a look in your purse?" Mary blinked in surprise. "My purse? Why?" "Just routine," Pete said, his voice firm but polite. "We have reason to believe something may have been taken from this store today." Outside, Tom's hand gripped the door handle of his car. One wrong move from Pete, and he would be inside that store in seconds. But for now, he watched and waited, collecting evidence with each passing moment. The flowers for his anniversary surprise lay forgotten on the passenger seat as his focus narrowed to the drama unfolding through the jewelry store window. Mary looked at Officer Pate with confusion in her eyes. She had never been in trouble with the law before, not even a parking ticket. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse closer. "I don't understand," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I just came to get my wedding ring cleaned for my anniversary." Pete kept his face serious, playing the role of a dutiful officer. "I'm sure there's nothing to worry about if you've done nothing wrong. It will only take a minute of your time." Mr. Jenkins stepped forward, his old face creased with concern. "Officer, I know Mrs. Wilson. She's been coming to my shop for 20 years. There must be some mistake." "I'm just following protocol, sir," Pete said firmly. "We've had reports of missing items in the area. It's a simple check, and then everyone can go about their day." Mary looked at Mr. Jenkins, then back at Pete. Slowly, she nodded and opened her purse. "Of course, officer. I have nothing to hide." Outside, Tom's knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel. Something was very wrong. Why was Pete targeting Mary specifically? There were other customers in the store. Tom's phone buzzed. A text from Lieutenant Grace. "On my way. 5 minutes. What's happening?" Tom quickly typed, "Officer Harris questioning my wife in jewelry store. No reported crime. Watch and record only for now." Inside, Pete made a show of looking through Mary's purse. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure others could hear it. This was the moment. Either his plan would work perfectly, or his career would be over. He reached into the purse, moving things around until his fingers touched the diamond pendant. "What's this?" Pete asked, his voice rising with fake surprise as he pulled out the sparkling pendant. He held it up for everyone in the store to see. Mary's mouth fell open. That's not mine. I've never seen that before in my life." Mr. Jenkins gasped. That's a platinum diamond pendant. It's worth nearly $10,000. We got those in last month. Let me check the display." As Mr. Jenkins hurried to a glass case near the back of the store, Pete kept his eyes on Mary. "Can you explain how this got into your purse, ma'am?" Mary's face had gone pale. "I can't. It's not mine. I didn't take it. There must be some mistake." Mr. Jenkins returned, his face grave. "One is missing from the case. I didn't even notice until now." The young man, still looking at engagement rings, backed away further, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. The store assistant behind the counter covered her mouth with her hand. Mary shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "Please, this is a mistake. I would never steal anything. I'm a kindergarten teacher, for goodness sake." Pete put the pendant in an evidence bag with gloved hands. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, but I'm going to have to ask you to come down to the station with me." Am I being arrested?" Mary's voice cracked. Pete nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Pete began reciting Miranda rights, Mary's tears fell freely now. The other customers watched in shocked silence as the kindergarten teacher they all knew was being treated like a common thief. Across the street, Tom was barely containing his rage. 25 years on the force had taught him to recognize a setup when he saw one. This had gone far enough. He reached for his phone and quickly opened the police department's security system app. As chief, he had remote access to all security camera feeds in the downtown area, including the jewelry store's system, which had been integrated with the police department's network last year. Tom tapped a few buttons and the feed from inside Prestige Jewelers appeared on his screen. He quickly rewound the footage, watching intently. There it was, clear as day. Pete slipping something into Mary's purse when she wasn't looking. Tom's jaw clenched as he saved the footage to his phone. Lieutenant Grace's unmarked car pulled up behind Tom's. She got out and slipped into his passenger seat. "What have we got, Chief?" Tom handed her his phone. "Evidence of Officer Harris planting evidence on my wife. Looks like he's about to arrest her for theft." Grace's eyes widened as she watched the footage. "That's a serious accusation against one of our own." "And I've got the proof right there," Tom said, his voice hard with controlled anger. "Let's wait until he brings her out. I want this all on record before we move in." Inside the store, Pete was putting handcuffs on Mary, whose face was now streaked with tears of confusion and humiliation. The kindergarten teacher looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would step in and explain that this was all a terrible mistake. "Please," she whispered, "call my husband. He's the police chief. He'll sort this out." Pete's smile was thin. "Oh, I'm counting on him finding out, Mrs. Wilson. Very much so." The cool metal of the handcuffs bit into Mary's wrists as Pete led her toward the door of the jewelry store. She held her head high despite the tears that threatened to spill over. 20 years of teaching 5-year-olds had taught her something about dignity in difficult moments. "I didn't do this," she said quietly, not to Pate but to Mr. Jenkins and his assistant, who watched with shocked expressions. "I would never steal anything." The old jeweler nodded, confusion written across his face. "There must be some mistake, officer. I've known Mary for decades." Pete ignored him, his hand firmly on Mary's elbow as he guided her toward the exit. "The evidence speaks for itself, sir." Outside in the car, Tom gripped his phone tightly as he watched the security footage once more. There was no doubt. Pete had deliberately planted the pendant in Mary's purse. Years of built-up frustration and anger had pushed Pete to cross a line that could not be uncrossed. "This is a clear case of evidence tampering," Lieutenant Grace said, her voice tight with professional disapproval, "not to mention misuse of power, false arrest, and personal vendetta against a superior officer's family member." Tom nodded, his jaw set in a hard line. "I want this by the book, Grace. When he brings her out, we document everything. No rushing in like an angry husband. We take him down the right way, with evidence and procedure." "Understood, Chief," Grace replied, already setting up her own phone to record. Inside the store, Mary stumbled slightly as Pete pushed her toward the door a bit too roughly. The few remaining customers stared, whispering to each other. Mary could feel their eyes on her, judging her, already deciding she was guilty. "Please," she said to Pete, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's been a mistake. I have 2 children waiting for me at home after school. I can't just disappear." For a brief moment, Pete's confidence faltered. He hadn't considered her children in his revenge plan. But it was too late to back out now. "Your husband can make arrangements," he said coldly, "after he comes down to the station." As they reached the door, Mary saw her reflection in the glass, a kindergarten teacher in handcuffs, her face pale with shock. How would she explain this to her students? To the parents? Would she even have a job after this? The bell jingled as Pete pushed open the door, stepping out into the afternoon sunlight with Mary in tow. The sidewalk wasn't crowded, but there were enough people passing by to stop and stare at the spectacle of a local woman in handcuffs. Mary felt her cheeks burn with shame. Across the street, Tom watched as his wife was paraded out of the store like a common criminal. Every fiber in his body screamed at him to rush over there, to protect her, to punch Pete right in his smug face. But 25 years of police work held him back. Justice needed to be done properly, or Pete might get away with it. Recording, Lieutenant Grace confirmed, her phone aimed at the scene. Pete led Mary toward his patrol car parked at the curb. He was so focused on his victory that he didn't notice the unmarked police car across the street or the 2 officers watching his every move. "Get in," Pete said, opening the back door of his patrol car. Mary hesitated, looking around desperately as if hoping for a miracle. That's when she saw him, Tom, her husband, stepping out of his car across the street. Their eyes met, and Mary felt a flood of relief wash over her. Tom would fix this. Tom always fixed things. But Tom didn't rush over. He didn't shout or make a scene. Instead, he simply stood there, his phone raised, recording everything. Mary's relief turned to confusion. Why wasn't he coming to help her? Pete noticed Mary's gaze and turned to look. His heart nearly stopped when he saw Chief Wilson standing across the street, staring directly at him. And worse, recording him. For the first time, doubt crept into Pete's mind. Had he made a terrible mistake? "Get in the car," Pete said again, his voice no longer confident but tinged with uncertainty. Tom started walking across the street now, his pace unhurried but purposeful. Lieutenant Grace followed a few steps behind. Their expressions were not those of angry civilians, but of police officers about to make an arrest. Pete swallowed hard, his hand automatically moving toward his weapon before he caught himself. This wasn't how his plan was supposed to go. Chief Wilson was supposed to find out later, to feel the humiliation of having his wife booked and processed before he could intervene. He wasn't supposed to be here, watching, gathering evidence. "Officer Harris," Tom called out, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority as police chief. "I believe you're making a serious mistake." People on the sidewalk stopped to watch the confrontation. A man pulled out his phone and began recording. Someone else whispered, "Isn't that the police chief?" Mary stood frozen between Pete and the patrol car, her handcuffed hands awkward in front of her. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever was happening, Tom had a plan. He always had a plan. Pete stood frozen beside his patrol car, one hand still on Mary's arm, the other hanging awkwardly at his side. The street had gone quiet as people sensed the tension building between the two police officers. "Chief Wilson," Pete managed to say, trying to sound professional. "I'm just doing my job. Your wife was caught stealing a diamond pendant from the jewelry store." Tom approached slowly, his phone still recording. 20 feet away. 15. 10. His face was a mask of calm, but his eyes burned with a quiet fury that made Pete take a small step back. "Is that so?" Tom asked, his voice steady and controlled. "That's interesting because I have video evidence that shows you planting that pendant in my wife's purse about 20 minutes ago." A murmur went through the small crowd that had gathered. Someone whispered, "Did he say planting evidence?" Lieutenant Grace stepped up beside Tom, her own phone recording as well. "Officer Harris, this is Lieutenant Grace from Internal Affairs. I need you to uncuff Mrs. Wilson immediately." Pete's face had gone pale. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I saw her take it." "No, you didn't," Tom said firmly. He held up his phone, showing the screen. "But I saw you plant it. The store's security system is linked to our department database, remember? I watched you slip that pendant into her purse when she wasn't looking." Mary looked between her husband and Pete, realization dawning on her face. You set me up? But why? What did I ever do to you?" Pete didn't answer her. His mind was racing, looking for a way out of this nightmare. He had been so careful, so clever. How had it all fallen apart so quickly? "Officer Harris, I won't ask again," Lieutenant Grace said, her voice harder now. "Remove those handcuffs from Mrs. Wilson." With shaking hands, Pete reached for his keys. The crowd had grown larger, with at least a dozen people watching now, many with phones out. Tomorrow, this would be all over social media. His career was over. His life was over. As the handcuffs came off, Mary rubbed her wrists and immediately moved to Tom's side. He put his arm around her shoulders protectively, but kept his eyes fixed on Pete. "Why?" Tom asked simply. 20 years on the force, and this is what you choose to do with your badge." Pete's face twisted with bitterness. 3 times, he spat. 3 times I was passed over for promotion. I was more qualified than any of those younger officers you picked, but you kept holding me back." "You held yourself back, Pete," Tom said quietly. "Those anger issues in your file. The complaints from the public about excessive force. The times you showed up late for shift. Did you think I didn't notice? Did you think I enjoyed writing those reports?" Mary looked up at her husband, seeing the sadness behind his anger. This wasn't just an officer gone bad. This was someone they had known for years, someone they had invited to barbecues and holiday parties. "You were going to destroy my wife's reputation," Tom continued, his voice tightly controlled. "You were willing to put an innocent woman in jail, to take a mother away from her children, just to get back at me." Pete had no answer. The reality of what he had done, what he had tried to do, was finally sinking in. Lieutenant Grace stepped forward. "Officer Harris, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." "You're arresting me?" Pete asked, disbelief in his voice. "Here? Now?" "Evidence tampering, false arrest, abuse of power," Grace listed off. "And we have it all on video." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Lieutenant Grace placed handcuffs on Pete's wrists, the same wrists that had just held Mary in custody minutes before. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Mr. Jenkins had come out of his jewelry store and stood watching from the doorway. "I can't believe it," he said to no one in particular. "I've known Pete since he was a rookie walking the beat." Tom handed his phone to another officer who had arrived on the scene. "Make sure this footage is secured properly," he instructed. Then he turned to Mary, finally allowing himself to be a husband rather than a police chief. "Are you okay?" Mary nodded, though tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "I was so scared, Tom. When he found that pendant in my purse, I thought I was losing my mind. I knew I hadn't taken anything." Tom pulled her into a gentle hug. "I know. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." As Lieutenant Grace led Pete toward her car, the disgraced officer looked back over his shoulder. "This isn't over, Wilson," he called out. Tom ignored him, focusing instead on his wife's trembling hands. "Actually," he said quietly, so only Mary could hear, "it is very much over." The crowd began to disperse as the excitement died down. An older woman approached Mary and patted her arm sympathetically. "We all knew you couldn't have done it, dear," she said kindly. "Not in a million years." By evening, the whole town was buzzing with the news. Phone videos of Pete's arrest had spread like wildfire across social media. The local news station had picked up the story, and reporters were gathered outside the police station when Tom arrived for the emergency press conference. "Chief Wilson, can you comment on the arrest of one of your officers today? Is it true Officer Harris framed your wife? How will this affect public trust in the police department?" The questions came at him from all directions as Tom made his way through the crowd. He wore his formal uniform now, the gold badge gleaming under the bright lights. His face was composed, professional, but those who knew him well could see the strain around his eyes. Inside the station, officers stood at attention as he walked through. Some nodded respectfully, others looked away in embarrassment. One bad officer had cast a shadow over all of them. Mary waited in Tom's office with their 2 children, who had been picked up from after-school activities by Tom's mother. 12-year-old Lily hugged her mom tightly, while 16-year-old Jack paced the room, his young face tight with anger. "How could Officer Pete do this to you, Mom?" Jack demanded. "He came to our birthday parties." Mary sighed, running her hand through her son's hair. "Sometimes people let anger and hurt feelings make them do terrible things," she said softly. "Even people we thought we knew." Tom entered the office and gave his family a quick hug before straightening his tie. "The press conference starts in 5 minutes. You don't have to come out there if you don't want to." Mary stood up, smoothing down her simple blue dress. "I'll stand with you. People need to see that we're okay, that this hasn't broken us." Tom looked at his wife with pride. 20 years of marriage, and she could still surprise him with her strength. The press room was packed, not just with local reporters, but with journalists from the city too. Cameras flashed as Tom took his place at the podium, Mary standing slightly behind him. Lieutenant Grace stood off to the side, her face serious. Tom cleared his throat and began speaking into the microphones. At approximately 2:30 this afternoon, Officer Peter Harris was arrested for multiple violations of police conduct and criminal law, including evidence tampering, false arrest, and abuse of authority. The cameras clicked and whirred. Tom continued, his voice steady and clear. "As your police chief, I want to assure you that this department has zero tolerance for corruption of any kind. Officer Harris' actions were those of a single individual who betrayed his oath and the trust of this community." A reporter raised her hand. "Chief Wilson, isn't there a conflict of interest here? The victim was your wife." Tom nodded. "That's why Internal Affairs Lieutenant Grace took lead on the arrest and why District Attorney Powell will be handling the case personally. I have removed myself from all aspects of the investigation." Another reporter stood up. "Mrs. Wilson, how do you feel about what happened today?" Mary stepped forward, her hands slightly shaking, but her voice steady. "I was terrified when I was being arrested for something I didn't do. But what hurts most is that someone we trusted, someone who has been in our home, would do this." The room fell quiet. There was something about the simple honesty in her words that cut through the usual press conference formality. "But," Mary continued, "I also saw our justice system work today. I saw good police officers step in to stop wrongdoing, even when it was one of their own. My husband has spent his career building a department based on integrity, and today I saw that firsthand." Tom reached back and squeezed her hand gratefully. A young reporter in the back raised his hand. "Chief Wilson, there are rumors that Officer Harris had been passed over for promotion several times. Was his performance that poor, or was there something personal between you two?" The room grew tense. Tom took a deep breath before answering. "Officer Harris was evaluated by the same standards as every other officer in this department. His performance reviews are now part of the investigation and will be made public as appropriate. But I can tell you this, a badge is not just authority, it's responsibility. We hold that responsibility sacred in this department." Lieutenant Grace stepped forward. "If I may add something," she said, The Internal Affairs Office keeps records of all promotion decisions and the reasoning behind them. These records will show that Chief Wilson's decisions regarding Officer Harris were fully justified based on documented performance issues. Tom nodded gratefully to Grace before continuing. What happened today was a tragedy for my wife, for this department, and for our community's trust. But it's also an opportunity to show that the system works, that no one is above the law, even those tasked with upholding it. As the press conference continued, Mary looked out at the sea of faces. Some were skeptical, others supportive. But all were listening. Whatever happened next, the truth was coming out. And for now, that was enough. 2 weeks had passed since that terrible day at the jewelry store. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Mary poured coffee into 2 mugs. She paused, looking at her reflection in the window glass. The dark circles under her eyes were finally fading. "Morning," Tom said, coming into the kitchen still buttoning his uniform shirt. Today was his first day back at work after taking personal leave to be with his family. Mary handed him a coffee mug. "Nervous?" Tom took a sip and nodded. "A little. Things won't be the same at the station." The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of their children getting ready upstairs. Jack's heavy footsteps and Lily's music, playing softly from her room, created a comforting backdrop of normal family life, something that had felt out of reach in the days following the incident. "Dad, can you drop me at practice early today?" Jack called, thumping down the stairs with his backpack and basketball. "Sure," Tom replied, grateful for the ordinary request. The last 2 weeks had been anything but ordinary. Pete's bail hearing had made front-page news. The evidence against him was overwhelming, not just the security footage from the jewelry store, but also text messages found on his phone showing his planning and intent. The district attorney had offered a plea deal, but Pete had refused, still insisting he was being set up himself somehow. "Mom, are you coming back to school today?" Lily asked, entering the kitchen and heading straight for the cereal box. Mary nodded. "Yes, first day back." She had taken time off from teaching kindergarten, worried about facing the parents and other teachers, but sitting at home hadn't helped either. It was time to get back to normal, whatever normal meant now. "The kids miss you," Lily said through a mouthful of cereal. "Mrs. Lee from the office told me they've been asking when you'll be back." Mary smiled, feeling a weight lift slightly from her shoulders. At least her students still believed in her. The doorbell rang, interrupting the family breakfast. Tom went to answer it and returned with a large bouquet of flowers. "Special delivery," he said, placing them on the table. "From Mr. Jenkins at the jewelry store." Mary opened the small card attached to the flowers. "To a woman of true character, may your anniversary be a new beginning." Her eyes filled with tears. Their 20th wedding anniversary was tomorrow, the reason she had gone to get her ring cleaned in the first place. In all the chaos, she had almost forgotten. Tom reached across the table and took her hand. "I still owe you that anniversary dinner. Reservations are at 7 tomorrow." "I don't know if I'm ready for a public dinner," Mary said hesitantly. "People will stare. They'll whisper." "Let them," Tom said firmly. "We have nothing to be ashamed of. Besides, the only opinion that matters is yours." He squeezed her hand. "And maybe the kids, when they're deciding whether to roll their eyes at us." Jack groaned right on cue, but there was a smile hiding behind his teenage embarrassment. After the kids left for school and Tom headed to the station, Mary found herself alone in the quiet house. She looked at the flowers, bright and hopeful, on the table. Then she got ready for work, choosing her favorite blue dress, the one that always made her feel confident. The drive to school felt longer than usual. As she pulled into the parking lot, Mary saw parents dropping off their children. Would they look at her differently now? Would they whisper behind her back? She took a deep breath and stepped out of her car. Almost immediately, a small voice called out, "Mrs. Wilson, you're back." One of her students, a little boy with untied shoelaces, ran toward her, arms outstretched for a hug. His mother followed behind, smiling warmly. "We've missed you," the mother said, handing Mary a hand-drawn card. "The kids made this for you." Mary opened it to find a page full of wobbly signatures and colorful drawings. "Welcome back, Mrs. Wilson," was written across the top in a grown-up's neat handwriting. More parents approached, offering kind words and support. The school principal came out to greet her with a gentle hug. "We never doubted you for a second," she whispered. As Mary walked toward her classroom, her phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "First briefing done." Everyone was supportive. New policies for evidence handling announced. "Change is coming. Love you." Mary smiled and typed back, "Love you too. See you tonight."